I would rather do like a pre-sale than a wait list. People are more invested and you can give a huge discount versus like, oh, you can get something later versus get it now and we'll just send it to you later. So we did that with Job Sprint, and yeah, we converted 5 people within the space of like a couple of weeks versus the waitlist never converted.
Welcome back to the Low Energy Leads Show. I know I said that we were done with our Selling Digital Products series, but today I have a bonus episode to you that I think you're really going to want to hear. Last Friday, I interviewed Chris Nguyen. Chris is the founder of UX Playbook. UX Playbook is a suite of products for UX designers that are leveling up in their career. And what Chris had to share about his different revenue streams, the percentages of how he's making that money, and specifically what's worked and what hasn't when it comes to selling digital products, I found our conversation really motivating. Chris has created this business and built this audience in just 2 years, and in the last 6 months, he's doubled his revenue. Unlike me, Chris primarily makes his money selling digital products, and so the questions we've been wrestling with in this series of how big does your audience size need to be, and at what point does it make sense for you to sell digital products, Chris answers these questions. Let's get into it. I'm Lex Roman. I help creatives make marketing bets they can win, and you're tuned in to the Low Energy Leads Show. As we get into this episode, I just want to share with you what you can expect. We're going to start by talking about what UX Playbook is. What is this company that Chris has created? We'll get into his audience and how he's built that out, because that's been a central question throughout this series. What size audience do you need to sell digital products? Then Chris will break down his revenue streams for us. He'll share where he's making money and how that's shifted over the last 6 to 9 months. And then lastly, we'll get into what worked and what hasn't. And Chris has some really detailed insights here that I know you're going to want to hear. Let's start first with what UX Playbook is. What is this company and why did Chris start it?
UX Playbook was an experiment when I quit my job in 2020, and organically it kind of grew on its own. And in 2022, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to work on this and put more time into that. So that's when, the social media stuff happened. But really, UX Playbook is my attempt to fix the broken UX education, because it's confusing to get started. There's no real world preparation, and it's all focused on skills versus like career and growth. And we do this through playbooks, courses, coaching, and really to help designers navigate this fuzziness and turn it into focus. So that's really what I'm trying to do with UX Playbook. And again, playbooks, courses, and coaching. Those are the 3 things that we offer. And we try to basically encapsulate the whole career, from like building a portfolio, finding a job, to like design leadership. So this is my take on that space.
Chris is a serial founder, and if you go to his LinkedIn, you'll see titles like mentor, entrepreneur in residence. So he's been at this a long time, and you'll notice throughout his insights that his entrepreneurial spirit shines through. He has tested so many different things, and that's what makes him an exciting person to listen to in the space of digital products. Now, Chris has a pretty sizable audience now, but he didn't start that way 2 years ago. This has been a question on our minds throughout this series. What's the minimum audience size you need to sell digital products? So I asked Chris where he started 2 years ago with his different marketing channels. Here's what he said.
So I had 3,000 on LinkedIn, and before this recording, we're speaking about it before, like I wasn't really active on LinkedIn, right? It was just me like adding people in my local area that are UX designers, basically. It's just me like spamming folks, not really strategically doing it. So from 3,000 just on LinkedIn. So I think we have 53,000 across like the channels, if you will. So LinkedIn being our top, I think we are nearly 38. Twitter, we're about 5,000. Our newsletter about 6,000, and then some other platforms we tried that we've got like 1,000, but like it's not anything to write home about, like YouTube and TikTok and IG. We're just like, we posted for like 3 months every single day, and it just grew to 1,000. We're just like, this sucks, like, and it wasn't proving a positive ROI, right? We had an editor, we had all of this stuff, and it was just like, it was a fun experiment.
LinkedIn has been a real standout channel for Chris. You'll notice that he's got over 30,000 followers on there, and especially given the growth that he's seen in the last 2 years, coming from 3K to 30K. I asked him, why did he think LinkedIn worked the best?
Trying to figure out the LinkedIn game, like learning the rules. And I think one of the biggest things for us is like, just be really active on it. Like with all the, I think it kind of rewards you. Not only is you get to meet really cool people like you, Lex, like I get to say, hey, but I think the platform just rewards activity. And so I can't remember who said this, but if you post like once a day, your followers might see your post, right? That's it. Maximum of one time a day. But if you comment on as many things, they might see you 60 times a day. So it's just the law of numbers, right? So that's why I spend at least 2 hours a day on LinkedIn. I don't really want to, because that's 2 hours of me not doing something else, but it's like, yeah, I think I want to get it to a point where I can just be like, okay, I don't need to go on LinkedIn. Like I can go 5 minutes a day, right?
Yeah.
That would probably be the point, or do more lives like this. But it's fun now. I just try to make a game of it and troll some people.
Now that you have some background on Chris, on UX Playbook, and on how he's built up this audience, let's move into talking about his revenue streams. If you're not on the Low Energy Leads newsletter, you're going to want to get on there because Chris put together this really beautiful Canva board with his revenue breakdown over the last 3 quarters and what he's tried, what's worked, and what hasn't. So you can see that all visually. I'm going to do my best to walk you through it, and Chris also speaks to it throughout the episode. So Chris has 5 revenue streams: digital products, services, sponsorships, affiliate income, and live cohort.
Digital product is by far, I think, the most in terms of split of revenue. Then we have services, things like portfolio critiques, coaching. Then a new one that we introduced relatively recently, actually in Q4 last year, is sponsorship, right? As you create content, folks want to use you as a marketing channel. So sponsorship is a new one. Then we have affiliates. This is not affiliates of mine or UX Playbook, is actually affiliates of other products. So me trying to sell other products. This has not worked. This is such a low percentage. It's not even worth doing. It's under 1% of our revenue. So might as well just kick that off. And then there's a live cohort, which was another experiment. It's like, can we do it? Is it fun? But that was a revenue stream in Q3, but it's no longer, and I'm sunsetting that, but turning it into a digital product because that's where most of our revenue is coming from.
Chris walks us through this piece by piece. Here's what he has to say about the revenue picture over the last 9 months.
Yeah, Q3 is when I decided to launch the cohort that I did. It was a very relatively small cohort. It was like 6 people. So you can see it took up 22% of the revenue because it was in the thousands of dollars. So that kind of made sense. Sponsorship, we basically got... one of our first times we got sponsorship. So that's a tiny, tiny percentage of the pie. Services was also not significant, I would say. But digital products accounted more than like 67% of what we did, right? So Q3 was $11,000-ish. And then Q4, we grew 78% to nearly $20,000. 76% that was digital products. This is also awesome because it's at that time of the year when people are really trigger happy with Black Friday, and we can talk about that later. But a lot of that revenue, actually 50% of that revenue came from November, right? 20 grand in Q4, 10 grand came from November, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And that also coincided with sponsorship. I think in November, that's when all the sponsorships were majority coming from. So we grew that because people knew that trigger happy shoppers. So that's why sponsors were also interesting. And then our service didn't really grow. Actually, it decreased in terms of revenue. Then move on to Q1. What we have seen that's grown, and we're on about 25K now, which is a 23% growth. Obviously, we haven't finished. We still have 2 weeks left, so fingers crossed we hit 30. But yeah, sponsorship has grown so much. And this is evident of me actually putting more effort into sponsorship and reaching out to folks. But also, as you get more sponsors, of course, you have case studies of previous sponsors you work with. So you're just more credible in that sense. So this is why I think it has grown. Services has also ramped up to about 15%. Oh, sorry, 17%. And digital products only accounted for 50% of this. So I guess diversifying the revenue stream just a little bit more. So we're not just stuck on my digital products, because my digital products are a one-time purchase, right? It's not recurring revenue. So I always have to bring people into the door. But if we, and just look at the revenue over the last 3 quarters split into a pie. So in top place is digital products with about 63% of the revenue split, sponsorship with 22%-ish, and then third place is services around 10%. And then the others you can kind of disregard because they're not that significant, in my opinion.
So there's this sentiment in online business that diversification of revenue streams is inherently good. This idea that we have multiple sources of income makes us more resilient business owners. And I think that on one level that can be true, because the more games you know how to play, the more resilient you are to changing economic forces, to changing industry conditions. At the same time, it can be a lot of plates to spin. And if one of those revenue streams is very, very small, it might not even be worth the effort to keep that revenue stream going. So I think diversification of revenue streams generally good, but when it actually comes into practice, it can be okay to say, oh, I'm making a little bit of money from this, but it's not enough to warrant the effort that I'm putting in. That's sort of the question we've been asking when it comes to selling digital products. So I asked Chris, what does he actually want this revenue picture to look like?
I did probably majority digital products. Like, I think that would be better, and sell less services, because that's like my time, right? Sponsorship would be cool, but yet again, it's like having a client. You're providing a service to a client. So
yes.
Ideally, I would say digital products, right?
At this point, Chris has many different things that he's offering. We talked about all those different revenue streams, but where did he start? What was the launch product? Here's how UX Playbook got started. Here's the first thing that Chris put into the market.
I started with one single guide. So it was, I believe, Product Persona. So it was one single guide for I had something like $3 or $4. I can't remember. And then that turned into UX Playbook, where there's 14 different guides, and then new playbooks like management, portfolio, all that stuff. But really, it just started with one guide. And when I was doing usability testing and just some contextual inquiries with some mates, in the first week, someone bought it randomly, because I had to basically put it on buy me a coffee just to test would they click the buy button, and obviously not having them pay for it. And then someone organically bought it, and that kind of started off this experiment to what it is now.
So you have a sense of what Chris is selling. On his website, you'll see bundles, products, services, and freebies. So he's got digital downloads, he's got services like his portfolio critique and the coaching workshop, and he has things like the live cohort, which he talked about in his revenue pie. If you caught the title of this episode, you know that it's about growing revenue with selling digital products. So you probably want to know, what exactly did Chris try that worked to increase his sales with digital products over the last 6 months? Again, we're going to go over to the Canva board, which I recommend you check out on the newsletter. And we're going to start with what has worked for Chris. The number one thing that he put on this board, naming, the product name. Here's what Chris said about the name of the product and how it's changed over time.
First, it was UX Playbook, right? A collection of guides. And then then my second product was UX Management Playbook, right? How do you train and build a kick-ass team culture, right? So then I was like, okay, that's interesting. They're still the same name. So naming and bundling is actually they have a direct correlation. So first, when I tried to bundle the products, I said, okay, what about you can buy UX Playbook, you can buy UX Management Playbook, and you can buy UX and Management Playbook together. It's a bundle. But then I just called it that. I just said, you get UX Playbook and Management Playbook, and that's the name. Yeah, so it's just like what? That's the product name. But then when I changed it to when I had more products, the junior designer bundle, the senior designer bundle, it improved revenue so much more. It was a significant bump. I can't tell you the exact metrics, but we did see like resonate with more like folks who are like, oh yeah, I want to be a junior, right? Or folks that I want to be a senior, or I'm already a senior. So I think naming your products based on the persona is super interesting. And for us, it worked really well.
Chris also talks about bundling products, which is really popular on some of the platforms. I've noticed that Gumroad now has that feature. This is a really key insight to pay attention to because he talks here about the naming of the bundles and how that actually impacted sales as well. So not just the product name, but also thoughtful naming of the bundles.
Bundling is crazy. So, I started with a one guide thing, right? I had one guide. Okay. So then I sold 12 different products. Okay. And it was like, okay, if you want stakeholder interviews, just get that thing. If you want wireframes, get that thing. And I was like, wait, why am I selling it like this? Okay, why don't I just bundle it into UX Playbook? Just get the whole playbook and you have a bunch of different things. So that was my first attempt at bundling. And turns out we sold more of that because people just kind of wanted to save money instead of like ordering 12 different things, right? And so they just bought the bundle. Then I went further and was like, okay, well, can we bundle UX Playbook and Management Playbook to target seniors and Growth Playbook to target seniors, right? These are potentially what seniors care about. And then for the junior bundle, it's about finding a job, portfolio, how to interview, right? And then, of course, UX Playbook being one of our core products, that's also in the bundle. So and then like you have these two personas that have different products. And then what about the everything bundle? And just so happens that we sell more of that than anything else because people just want it all for a cheaper price, right? So I've tried bundling in a bunch of different ways, and I kind of worked up like to bundling and be like, what can we bundle? What can we add? So I've done like another one, which is also related to naming, which is like the design like transition bundle that didn't really work out, or the job hunting bundle that didn't really work out, right? So these ones that stuck are the ones that actually sold, and I'm like, okay, well, that's what I'm just going to call it, and that's the configuration of the bundle basically.
Also in the what worked column, discounts and sales. Here Chris talks about last November versus this November, so 2022 to 2023, what changed to boost their revenue, and it all has to do with a very specific sale.
Yeah, so last November, and I did a brief check. We literally did so bad. Like, we did so bad last November, and it was like because Black Friday, it wasn't in my mind, and I was probably busy doing something else. But then this Black Friday, I was like, okay, it's 3 or 4 weeks before Black Friday. I want to make sure everybody knows that something is going on. Like there's a sale. They can absolutely get a steal. And that was the strategy, right? So we new banners across all the social medias. The description was only about Black Friday, like your headline, right? So it's like the featured post, multiple email blasts. I think we did like maybe even like 3 or 4 leading up, and then like reminding people, and then last chance. So you really have to like the number one learning is just tell people that they can get a discount, right? Like it's as simple as that. And I just didn't do that last year. And yeah, but it doesn't always work because I did it again for Chinese New Year, but nobody cares about Chinese New Year, right? Like, literally nobody cares, right? It's not known to be the holiday that everybody's spending money in the West. In the East, yeah, everybody's like, broke by Chinese New Year. But so you got to pick your times, right? And for us, it makes sense because most of our audience, like I think 47% of our customers are from the US.
Hey, did you know that you can sponsor the Low Energy Leads show? Yes, I might have a small but committed audience, But you can sponsor the show for a deal and a half. And there's two ways to do this. One is that you can trade me for promotion in your newsletter, on your podcast, in your live streams. And the other is that you can pay to promote yourself on any of my platforms. If you head over to lowenergyleads.com and you click sponsor the show, you'll be taken over to my passion fruit page where you can see all of the options and the ways that you can promote your business through Low Energy Leads. You can also see the show stats and more about locations where listeners are paying attention. So get in touch if it might make sense for you, and let's promote your business. The last thing we're going to touch on when it comes to what worked is abandoned cart. Abandoned cart is something you're probably familiar with. It's the idea that if someone gives you their email, you can email them and say, hey, you left this in your cart. Did you mean to purchase this? And this is a feature that is automated in a lot of carts. Chris talks about this feature and why it made sense for them to pay for it.
I didn't switch this on because I was too cheap. So what happened was I got the midpoint of Squarespace pricing because I was like, I don't need the full thing. I'll just do this. But it didn't have this abandoned cart feature. And I was like, and then I finally was like, oh, let me just upgrade and switch this on. It didn't work straight away, but it did start working for us. And what we did was we offered a discount. We just said, hey, if you put something in your cart and within 24 hours, they don't buy, you send them an email, considered they've given you your email, and you just give them a discount, right? And then if they purchase within that 24 hours of receiving that email, then it's registered as an abandoned cart. Sometimes they do it after, but in Q1 alone, it has been, we converted 9% of the people that we could email, which is a great conversion metric, right?
Yeah, totally.
So it's actually worth it. And if I just look back at all the abandoned cart sales that we've got, it's basically paid for software for 2 or 3 years. You can also customize it to that email address, right? You can put some of that email address and a number or something, so it looks like a personalized code. And for folks, it just creates a bit more urgency, and they're like, oh, okay, cool.
Moving on to what didn't work. There's 4 things on the board here that Chris spoke about didn't work for UX Playbook: affiliates, upselling services, cheaper pricing, and the wait list. I want to start with the wait list because that's a thing I see a lot of us doing. I've had trouble with it too. Here's what Chris said about his thinking and trials with things like wait lists, early access, and pre-orders.
I think we tried it twice. The first one was the second product. So I was working on a second product. It like product development, everything takes longer than you expect it to be. So I also think that if you want to do a wait list, you best be sure that it's relatively soon, because people are going to forget, right? The urgency they felt before, they don't feel now. So I think my wait list was for 4 weeks, and that was way too long, even with a huge discount. So we had 250 people on the wait list, which is pretty good for having a tiny audience back then. And I think we converted 2, maybe 3. I don't really remember. So I haven't really cracked this wait list, how to do it, how to cause excitement. And maybe I didn't do a good job of product updates during the waitlist. So that is something for me. I'm still yet to crack it, but for us, it hasn't worked. So we've done 2 waitlists. Yeah, I'd rather do a pre-sale than a waitlist, to be honest, because I think that's just way better. People are more invested, and you can give a huge discount versus oh, you can get something later versus get it now and we'll just send it to you later. So we did that with Job Sprint, and we converted 5 people within the space of a couple of weeks versus the waitlist never converted.
So Job Sprint is still in pre-order right now. Is that right?
No, it's actually early access. So
what's the difference?
So pre-order is you can't get any of it, right? You're going to get the product soon. And then early access is hey, I'm working on it. And because this product took so long to make, just hours of video editing, that I was no, I have to give people who's on the wait list a taste of the product. So I'm just going to do early access. So now they have access to 5 modules, which is plenty of their time it should take up. And then I'm working on the last module now.
The interplay of products and services is really hard. And as we've explored through this series, Most of us are leaning heavily towards products or services. In Chris's case, he's leaning towards products, but he does sell some services. And he's found that it's really challenging to go from product to services. It's a lot easier to go from services to product. Here's why he said product downsells work better than upselling services.
I have two services on the website. One is, this is also naming, where I had this product, which is like 1 hour coaching. People are like, who cares about 1 hour coaching? Then when I changed the name to coaching workshop, people were like, I'll buy this. And I was like, what the hell, man? It's the same thing, right? Like I just phrased it differently because a workshop sounds way better apparently. But that's basically what we do in coaching, right? We jump on a whiteboard and we start figuring stuff out. So I changed the name of that. But anyway, so from these services, because it's like quite high touch, one is a 1 hour call. The other is I send a 20-minute video to you. I've built enough trust with the customers that when I recommend a product there, it converts quite well, right? And it's usually a downsell because the products are less, right? Because services are always more expensive. So if I roast your portfolio and it's really bad, and I'm like, dude, just get the portfolio playbook. People usually get the portfolio playbook. That makes sense, right? It's like $69 or whatever it is. But it's harder to say, hey, you've just bought the portfolio playbook. Do you want to finish your portfolio and let me roast it? And majority of people are like, no, right? They haven't shown me that they would be like, oh, I'll prefer this other thing. And I've tried to integrate it into the product as much as possible in terms of upselling services, because I know it's, we're solving the same problem here, right? A portfolio playbook to tell you how to do a portfolio, and then a review of your portfolio is like near enough the same thing. And it's more hyper-personalized here. For us, it just hasn't worked, and I don't know what to do. And maybe it should be a more of a targeted approach, or maybe there's an integration of a video of some sorts. But for us, it just hasn't worked.
We didn't talk much about pricing in this episode, but one of the things Chris put on the what didn't work column was cheaper pricing. And pricing is always the bane of everyone's existence. What should something cost? What is something actually worth? What's the perceived value? Should it be a 5, a 7, or a 9? Here's what Chris said about his lesson in cheaper pricing.
Cheaper pricing is completely counterintuitive. You thought so 1 month we made like the best revenue month back in 2022. We were like, oh my God. And it's because we had this portfolio playbook for $19, right? And that just sold like crazy. And we had our best revenue month. But then when I tried to experiment with the same concepts with like our bundles and stuff, like really cheap, didn't work, right? Like it was probably below average month. And it was just like, this is crazy. Like, why wouldn't people download a 93,000 word guide for like $99? So be careful your pricing. And that's the takeaway for the audience, I think, because pricing is such a sensitive subject.
In my mind, it's always good to start lower rather than higher, because you can always go up. It's a lot harder to go down. And there's a lot of calculations you can do around pricing. I've been recently reading Austin Church's book, Free Money, which is mainly about selling freelance services, but has some really interesting calculations that you could also use in the product realm. You can tell through this episode that Chris is a rapid experimenter, and I like to say that the people who succeed fast learn fast. Chris embodies this really well. So I asked him, what's he trying now? What's the current experiment look like?
What's next for us is I am testing, instead of a freebie or like a lead magnet, right? Something related to the product that you can upsell. I'm actually giving, let's just say 20% of the product for free. Oh, not free, $1, which is the job sprint, and letting people try it. And if they try it and they like it, they will buy the full thing. If they don't like it, they get the first module, which is 32 videos, 14 workshop activities, 4 in-depth guides for $1. And that's fine. And that's the most common problem I hear from designers, where it's like, I don't know how to stand out. Well, check out this course for $1. We already had 3 customers, but yeah, that's what I'm trying next. And we'll see if this kind of $1 trial works, because then if it does, I'm going to roll it out to other things.
You can find Chris on LinkedIn, and I highly recommend following him. He's a really excellent content creator on LinkedIn. You can also see what he's up to at uxplaybook.org and check out all of his different landing pages, how he's positioning all of these different offers we spoke about today. You're also going to want to get on the Low Energy Leads newsletter if you're not already. I share tools there like Chris's Canva board. You can see his revenue breakdowns. You can see what worked and what didn't. And I also share templates that I create to make selling digital products and selling services even easier for you. Go to read.lowenergyleads.com to get on that list. I'm going to be hitting pause on live streams. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. Not that anyone comes to them anyway, which is one of the reasons why I'm hitting pause on them. I feel like live streams could be really cool in the low energy leads community, but it's really hard for me to figure out where they fit in. So I'm going to hit pause on that. We're streamlining, we're downsizing, we're simplifying this year. And so on that note, next week's episode is going to be very simple, very tactical. Coming up next week, we're talking about how to do an email newsletter swap. Until next time, keep your energy low until you know the value will be high.